Not often enough we actually design our lives to have little peak moments. I think it's a way for us to kind of take a little bit back control over how we live our lives.
Brittni, it's such a pleasure to have you on the 3 Points podcast. What a pleasure. What an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us.
I'm very, very excited to be here. No one
Good.
really realizes all of the behind the scenes of scheduling and how much time and energy it took for us to do this, but I'm so happy that we're
It
finally
takes
here.
it takes time, but I always say that the best things come to those who wait, and we have waited and we finally made it. And what's really fun, Brittni, just as we get ready to introduce our theme for today and what your 3 points you're going to share, what's really fun is that this is the first time you and I are meeting, but yet your reputation precedes you. Is that what they say? But my team got to meet you in Dublin, and you were playing a very critical role in a huge event for Google for Education in the Google Dublin offices, my old stomping ground where I started my career in this sort of sector many moons ago. And they spoke so highly of you, all of them. I think there was two or three of them from People Playbook at this event. They said, you got to meet Brittni. So
Oh,
that's the level, I didn't even need to meet. I was like, we got to get her on the podcast.
I love that. That's very, very sweet. I mean, this is what I like. Well, that would be exactly the kind of thing that I would hope people would say. You know what I mean? Like I'm very pleased with that. So super happy. That was an incredible event that I had the opportunity to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can tell, I think, that I'm excited to chat to you because you and I are in similar fields and spaces. And also it's such a hard craft to find the balance between bringing energy, but also not being over the top, sharing things and being expert, but not being arrogant. And, to create this experience is really, really difficult. So when our team was saying, hey, Brittni was amazing, was authentic, brought great energy, you'd clearly done the work in terms of preparation to set yourself up for success. It was just, for me, it was so exciting then to invite you onto this podcast. And actually, it's a great segue, isn't it, Brittni? Because your 3 points that we're going to talk about today are all around peak experiences. And I maybe want to just start off by asking you, why is this important to you?
Honestly, this is something that once I discovered it, it completely changed my career. It changed the way that I work in such a drastic way. And it also just impacted my life in a really big way. I think so often, our careers and our lives are, obviously stacked on top of each other and are very fluid, especially for people who are self-employed like I am. So when I learned about like peak experiences and creating peak moments and how to kind of um, this sounds terrible, but like manipulate situations a little bit in the best way only. And I just realized what an impact it can have on me and my work experience, like the way that I experience my client work and the way that I interact with people and the way that I leave people feeling, I'm a big believer in the statement, people will always remember how you made them feel. And I think that that's one thing that I want to, leave behind always. Every time I leave a room is I want people to be like, cool, like that was great, and like have a good feeling. So yeah, I'm so passionate about it. And if you've followed me on any platform, it's something that I talk about all the time.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, before I launch into your first point to dig deeper into this, I just want to say I love that you've applied it both to your personal and your professional, how it's changed the way you see the world. I'm curious, maybe again for our listeners or folks that are watching on YouTube, how does this fit within your professional craft and your context? Maybe share just a very short snippet of what you do, Brittni, because I think
Yeah.
that's good context setting for us.
Totally. So I am professionally, I am a workshop designer, facilitator, and event host. So I do all kinds, anytime like you're looking to like bring a group of people together, you want to get from point A to point B, and you want to have like a little bit of fun while you do it, then I'm your gal. I work in all different kinds of industries, so it's really hard to kind of like pinpoint. I work in, some companies that are creating consumer products. I work with some more digital focused companies. Some even like insurance, you know what I mean? Like big companies that are doing sort of random things, but the thing that they all have in common is they have a team or several teams that they really want to motivate. They really want to get them to kind of get a little bit more excited about their work, to work together a little bit more effectively, to get better outcomes generally. So that's my ultimate perfect client, was when all of those kind of stars align.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Tremendous alignment to all of us at People Playbook. So I'm delighted, Brittni. Well, look, that's the table well and truly set. Let's launch into your first point around peak experiences, which I think connects a lot to what you just shared there. Number one, why we should have more fun at work and why it's important.
Yeah. So this is something that, I'm very, it's very important to me that my clients, the people that I work with, have kind of this as a value because it's a huge, like, it's one of my core values is that I just think we ought to all have a little bit more fun in our lives. The clients that I'm working with, generally speaking, we're not, saving lives. Let's just put it that way. A lot of the times, we are building products, often the products can potentially be life changing. But, I'm just saying that, the things that we do, we don't have to actually be so serious about it all the time. And I find that even in the most serious sort of groups or scenarios, it's often those people that are the most excited to like let loose and have a good time. And it just reminds me that I'm like, God, we're all just humans. We're all just like people roaming around this earth. And like, why wouldn't we all want to have a little bit more fun at all stages in our lives? Um, Now, when I do talk about that, so I'm a big advocate for having more fun at work and being a little bit silly. I don't take myself too seriously, but I do take my work seriously. So it is very important to me that we achieve a lot together, but I just really believe in productivity and efficiency and effectiveness going hand in hand with, people having a good time. And the one thing that I have found across the board is when people have more fun, they do better work. They're more motivated, they're more engaged, they're excited, and, it's just all across, it just makes so much sense to me. And I think when people aren't aligned with that, I'm
Mm.
usually just like, I'm not the right person to be working with you then.
I love that. I love that you see it as hand in hand and not choose one. Choose the fun or choose the productivity. Choose the fun or choose being more effective. Choose the fun or choose working better together. So you see it as integral. I think you and I are again aligned on that and we share that. I'm curious about when you're pitching to some of the more, as you say, serious clients who maybe are a little bit more resistant, who have perhaps an assumption or a belief that fun is for outside the office, but we don't bring it into the office or into our work. How do those conversations go, Brittni? And I also, I really appreciate that at the end there you just shared, well, sometimes it might not be the right client for you. And I think that's something that I've developed an understanding of over time, that actually, we're not everyone's cup of tea, and that's okay. But I'm curious about that journey of exploration with clients that say, "Oh, you're gonna not too much fun, Brittni, not too much fun, please."
Yeah, so it is interesting because I think, okay, I have sort of two things to say about this. So the first is that the fun doesn't supersede, the outcome, right? Or the
Yeah.
success of what we're going to achieve together. So it's never like fun first and like, that rest of the stuff doesn't matter. So like I said, those two things happen together. And at the same time, I am very, if I you know how important it is as a facilitator, as someone running events and workshops, to be able to kind of read the room and, see what's
Mm,
going on and adjust accordingly. So if I walk into a room and I'm like, whoa, these people are like extremely serious. They are very like, let's get down to business in that mindset. Then what I will do in that scenario is that I will kind of adjust maybe where and how I'm like interjecting fun into our workshop. So for instance, I will make sure that everything is very much set in terms of like our expectations are in check. We have like I've shared the agenda. They know exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and built a little bit more trust. And
Mm,
then I can get a little bit goofy and add my little jokes and then have a little bit of a fun time. But I think it's really important, especially actually when you're going in with a new group or someone who is a little bit earlier in their career. I've often had that question of like, how can I like be fun without people thinking I'm being unprofessional? And it's like, okay, always, always, always establish trust before you start like unleashing your knock knock jokes, right? Like I actually always, that thing of like open with a joke. I'm always like, do not open with a joke. Like my thing is like, I don't think you should actually open with a joke if you're not sure that your audience will be really receptive to it. So if you're unsure, then establish your credibility first. Then you can kind of like trinkle in your fun stuff afterwards. And the second thing that I think around this that I have really found has made a big difference in how I find clients and how I sort of like find those matches is I'm super active on social media, and it's very rare that I have a client come to me who has literally never seen, a video of mine or, read something that I've posted or what. It is rare. It happens, of course, but it's quite rare. So what usually happens is people who are coming to me they already kind of know what they're getting. They already kind of know what my vibe is. Me putting myself out there in an authentic way and,
mm,
speaking my truth and telling people what I'm actually about helps me have this like filter for clients where when people are
mm.
coming up to me, they already kind of know and they're
Yeah.
excited about what I have to offer.
Yeah, I like that. It's such a critical part. And I know you do a lot of work in the personal branding space as well. And just this idea of, I think it reduces the gap between what they're expecting and how you're going to show up, right? And I think oftentimes any conflict or a lot of conflict stems from a misalignment of expectations. Well, look, let's jump into your second point then, Brittni, and thanks for kind of setting the stage there of why it's important to have fun at work. Let's talk about how we can create experiences in the mundane every day.
Yeah, so I guess this one is like a little bit, it crosses over between work and life, but one thing that I've found, so I'm self-employed. I like my office is in my home. So I'm very often spending a lot of time, at home, which I love. I love the flexibility. I love the, like to plan my days, be able to take my dog for a walk randomly. But the one thing that I know is that being at home, not having like an office to go to every day. Often I'm running workshops and I'm traveling, but when I'm home, I'm very much in and around my space
Mm,
at home for quite a lot of the time. So that tends to start to feel a little bit mundane and a little bit boring. And even if you go to work every day to an office, it can start to feel a little bit mundane. And one thing that I've found really effective for me is like picking a moment every day and having like just one sort of little peak thing that I'm going to
mm,
do for myself. And that just for me creates a lot of like motivation. It energizes me, and it can be like the smallest thing, whether I'm like, "Ooh, what am I going to cook for dinner?" Let's be honest. A lot of times these are food focused, okay, Tony, but like, you know what I mean? But they don't have to be, right? If it's just like, I'm going to take my dog for an extra long walk at lunch, or I'm going to go and like sit in the park and have my like sandwich or whatever. I just think that not often enough we actually like design our lives to have little peak
mhm,
moments, and we find ourselves sort of like those peak moments are kind of falling in our laps sometimes, or they're just sort of happening to us. But you can actually create a life that consists of a lot of really great peaks. When I am running workshops, like I always have these little sort of tricks up my sleeve that will help people have a more like memorable experience. And I think that what happens is people often come to a workshop of mine. And of course, like, so my clients, have maybe heard of me, or we have maybe a relationship already before they hire me. But often the people who are coming to my workshops no idea, right? Like they don't know
Mm.
who I am. They don't know what I'm about. So it's just such a great opportunity for me to deliver something that it just exceeds their expectations and goes beyond what they even thought they would be, experiencing during the week. And so I like to kind of do that. And I find a lot of, I get a lot out of it, just personally, it feels really good
Yeah,
when people are like, oh, wow, like that was really cool, or that was so nice, or whatever. And I really try to design my work and my life with that in mind of like, what's my going to be my peak experience today?
I love that. Big fan of how you've described it. The thing that jumps out to me, Brittni, is you're so intentional and thoughtful about it. In the work context, then let's talk a little bit about, and I'm curious about, because of course there's the how you design and deliver in your workshops, and also, perhaps how do you, work with other individuals or share some of this that they can take some lessons in throughout their workday, especially those that, aren't as maybe fortunate as us, who maybe have a little bit more control and autonomy over our day. But there are others that might be saying, well, that's great, Brittni, but I'm actually, I have to be in the office at 8:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m.
100%. And I know that I am not, I know that I am very lucky and that obviously not living the same scenario to a lot of people. But I think so for me, when it comes to work, um, and for work in like a more traditional sense, I think that what it is about like creating peak moments for yourself, for me
Mm,
anyway, and maybe not for everybody, but it often includes like other people. So,
mm,
creating like a peak moment for you can very often be you creating a peak moment for someone else. And I think that that's like often the best peak moment, is when you have taken some time and been a little bit thoughtful about what you can do, for your team or for a colleague or whatever.
mm,
And I think, you know, we're often, I mean, I know I work with a lot of like more corporate clients, so I know that it's meetings are heavy, right? It's like you're usually in meetings almost the entire day, which boggles my mind, but here we are. It's still happening. So we're in meetings like almost all day. And I'm thinking like in my mind, I'm like, what can I do? If I'm running the meeting, or even if I'm not running the meeting, maybe there's like something that I can do in this meeting today. Maybe I can like
mm,
start the meeting by asking everybody how they're doing, or like what's the best thing that happened to them over the last weekend, or what are they looking forward to coming up. Is there something that I can do that creates a bit of connection, because often a peak moment is all really about connection. So I one of the like just to give you an example, and it's so funny because it's so like sometimes when I think about this, I'm like, gosh, Britt, like you're such a cheese ball. Like it really is often quite cheesy and sometimes a little cringy, but I would challenge you to, just grin and bear the cringe, because often the outcome is really great. So one thing that I started introducing in my workshops, which I'm never going to stop until I find something better because it's so good, but I have these really cute little thank you postcards. They're like a branded postcard. They have a little illustration on them and they just say thank you. And the other side is the other side. And then I always bring them along to any workshop and event that I'm running. And I brought them to this specific workshop. It was like a 1 week long workshop. We really got to know each other. And I was like, I'm going to get them to write the thank you notes to each other. Right. I was like, brilliant. So I went in, and at the end of the day, I passed them all a thank you note. And basically I said, I want you all to write a short thank you to the person sitting to your right about something that they contributed to our workshop week. So I got them to read them all out to each other. And I'm telling you, it was one of the sweetest moments. Like it was so sweet and like there were people almost in tears, and it was just like it was so wonderful. And I got
mm.
feedback from that workshop that was like a massive highlight for everybody, because it's such a bonding experience, being in a workshop together, and especially for a full week, it's a, you're really working together quite closely. And so it was like just this perfect wrap up. And it was interesting because if you think about that story, it's like I shifted it to being like, how can I help them like connect to each other more? And that made that moment and that exercise just 100 times better.
Yeah, that's what a great moment and great thoughtful exercise. And I love that. I just love the journey of, oh, I'm going to do this. Actually, here's what's better. And also just the fact, Brittni, you clearly were aware and self-aware enough to know that actually the group had built up relationships with each other, with you. And so there was a level of trust or psychological safety there. I love that. Let's get into your third point now. So we sort of set the stage by discussing why we should have more fun at work and why that's important. And then we moved on to talk about your second point, how we can create experiences on the mundane every day. You talked about in your personal life, really framing the highlight that you're going to have in the day and the sort of peak experience. Our third point for you, Brittni, is the one thing that you know to be true above all else. Let's talk about that.
Okay. So I think that, so we've said literally the words peak moment probably about 100 times so far in this 30-minute chat. So I think that one thing that I learned, and it's from a book. So there's this book called The Power of Moments. It's by Chip and Dan Heath brothers. And they basically talk about how peak moments basically help us remember events and experiences as being like, this is kind of the crazy thing, as being better than they actually were. So let's say you attended a workshop of mine, Tony. And to be honest, like, I was not on top of my game. Things were a little bit clunky. I just, even in, I didn't really feel like I was really nailing it. Maybe we got to the outcome, but I was like, oh, that could have gone smoother, right? So
Hmm.
let's say you came to that workshop and I just kind of delivered it and that was sort of it. You leave that workshop and you're thinking to yourself, okay, like whatever, I guess that was fine. Versus you come to that same workshop, I'm still quite clunky, things aren't going very great, but we get to our outcome in the end because workshops are a very powerful tool. And usually, even if you're feeling clunky, you get to where you want to go. But I have specifically designed several peak moments in strategic places throughout
Hmm.
our workshop to make you feel good, to make you feel surprised, to basically make you feel something positive. You will leave that workshop feeling like and remembering it as a whole heck of a lot better than it actually was. And that is one of the most powerful things I've learned in a really long time. And I mean, that's why I wanted to talk about this. That's why I talk about it so much, is
Hmm.
because it's something that I just absolutely know to be true because I've seen it so many times. And it's just like a peak moment is basically a moment where you make someone feel like a peak emotion. So it can be, like I said, surprise. It could be like they laugh at something. It could be that something just made them feel like warm and fuzzy, or they felt really energized. Just anything that kind of like elevates where they're usually at. And of course, figuring out strategically where these peaks need to happen is a big part of this, of building this skill, right? So, I think that it doesn't work if it's like your workshop is like you're doing stuff and then you end with a peak moment, right? Feels a little forced, feels a little bit random. I think that they need to be placed in strategic places where you might sense like that there's maybe like a little bit of a lull in the room, usually like an after lunch scenario where
Hmm.
everybody's a bit tired, right? Design a peak moment there. Like just figuring out where they need to go and making sure that your experience, your event, and actually just designing your workshop or your meeting as an experience and not as a meeting and as a workshop is critical. And that's where these peak moments come in. What I know above all else is designing peak moments in your work, in your life, and being really strategic about it and being very, kind of forceful with it, I think is something that's going to basically take your work from, or your life, let's say, from sort of like a mediocre level to excellent, to, something that's like memorable and positive and energetic. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, listen, I'm bought in. I love again, everything that you share is very intentional. The image that came to my mind, and certainly, keeping in mind these peak moments, it's like these pillars that are propping everything else up. So even if there's a dent or a pothole in the road, because you've got these peak moments, these pillars, they're gonna they're going to stand the test of time essentially and provide some rigidity to your, your event, your program, your workshop, and keep things smooth. And I love the idea of the positive element and the connecting to sort of being memorable, right? And
Yeah.
I certainly agree with that. And I think that's a really good point. I'm curious about from a design principle, Brittany, before we start to wrap up, and I'll let you get on to designing more peak moments. Is I'm curious about, do you start with the peak moment and then fill around, and like how does it look? Because you compared it to sort of maybe another meeting or a sort of another event that someone else might run. And oftentimes, I'm sure you see this, they lead with content. They are the things that I have to say. Here are the things, and they just sort of unload it on people and not very thoughtful about experience at all, which is why, again, I was really excited to hear more about how you approach this in your work. So, yeah, tell me a little bit about your design thinking around this.
So, what I usually do, usually it's very clear what our outcome needs to be, and, sort of like where we're starting and where we need to go. And so, I would say that the content and the peak moments do sort of get designed together. At every stage of my workshop, I'm thinking, how do I want people to feel right now? So at the beginning of my workshop, I want people to feel engaged. I want them to feel motivated. I want them to feel also quite safe, to participate and, contribute to what we're working on. So with those thoughts in mind, that's when I think about what is my kind of like
Mm,
peak moment here. Instead of being like, what do I need people to do? Because I think that's often our go-to is like, what do I need people to do in order for this workshop to be successful? It's like, take a step back and actually start with how you need them to feel. Because that, for me, it impacts the
mm.
success in such a huge way.
Awesome. Well, look, let's we're gonna full circle this, because we start off. I asked you about why it was important. We talked about your 3 points, why we should have more fun at work, how can we create experiences in the mundane every day, and then now you shared the power of peak moments, which is just fantastic for all of us that are they're leading anything with groups specifically, right? How we can be more thoughtful and intentional. And now what I want to do is I want to close off by asking you um, this question, which I think you've somewhat touched upon already, but let's really double down on, how do you think implementing these points could not only change the workplace, but change the world?
I just think that life is actually quite short. And, we have a limited time on this planet, I know for me, the most important thing in my life are the connections that I make and the relationships that I have. And taking peak moments, although it can sound a little bit like manipulative and inauthentic, I think it's a way for us to kind of take a little bit back control over how we live our lives and the interactions that we have, and how positive and how energized and how whatever, we're able to make each other feel. Having something really tangible that I can use to have a better impact
Mm.
on people in my life, and just leave every spot I go with a few more smiles. As cheesy as that sounds, I think it's really powerful. So that's what I would say to
I
wrap it
love
all
it.
up in a bow.
I love it. It's positive. It's energizing. I mean, I'm getting excited right here. My adrenaline's running, and I just think that how you've described the change that you want to see in the world is, it just resonates so much, because a lot of what you and I do in our spaces and our respective fields, it I always think, look, we've got a couple of hours here, like, let's give it a good go. We use the basketball term, leave it all on the court, because that's my
Yeah.
sport. And it's about just putting it all out there and giving it your best. And I feel both my responsibility as a facilitator and as a leader is to do that. And I also put that on our participants, hey, we're here. Let's give it a good go, because,
Totally.
who's got time for a crappy experience? Let's make it a great experience.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more with you, Tony. You're very good at taking what I say and and like making it sound so much better.
Ah, no,
I'm
you-
stealing some of these analogies. I'm taking them
I
with me.
Well, listen, we're learning together, and it's been such a pleasure. And Brittni, just before we wrap up, I do want to let folks know, definitely give you a follow on LinkedIn. You do have a newsletter. We'll put that in the show notes, so
Yeah.
people can stay connected to you and all the amazing stuff you're putting out to the world. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. It's been such a pleasure.
Oh, what a pleasure it's been for me.